Chapter 44, Salvation, 2005. Salvation appeared in the form of Special Agent Roland Martinez, who brought great news to the Northern Exposure Team. The Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force Board in San Francisco had given the go-ahead. The FBI would support the one investigation. Suddenly, the team had money for officer overtime. Their own cars, sophisticated surveillance equipment, cash for drug buys and paying informants, legal help from the Northern California District Prosecutors. And Reyes thought with satisfaction they'd have the clout they'd need with the federal judges to tap Tigre, BJ, and Bubba's phones. He cornered Martinez. "I have to get up on the wire and listen to these guys," he said. "They just killed this chick." He hated to beg. "Look, we have to be up on the wire so we can try to fucking intercept what they're talking about. Somebody has to be saying something." Martinez listened but didn't budge. Begging didn't seem to work, so Reyes tried logic. "Why would a Salinas girl married to a general be up at Mount Madonna?" he asked. Baby Joker and Tigre had to be involved in the hit. That was their turf. Those guys were known to be using females, and Crystal was tight with old girl and Rosa was hooked with Tigre and BJ. The web was there. It was there. "Isn't this enough?" he implored, his arguments exhausted. "No," the agent said. "The probable cause wasn't there. Prosecutors needed evidence specifically implicating Tigre and BJ. Hunches and logic weren't good enough. It wasn't Martinez's fault. He was just keeping it real. They needed more." Reyes couldn't believe it. He asked the state DOJ guy on the one team about it. The guy knew the California rules for wiretaps, and he told Reyes he thought the team had more than enough probable cause. The problem was they could no longer go for a state wire because now the feds were involved. It was the FBI's game, and the team was stuck with their rules. Reyes' frustration simmered. He felt awful when he talked with the detectives in Santa Clara. Those homicide investigators needed help, but there was nothing the task force could do for them. Every time Agent Martinez asked the federal prosecutors in San Jose about the wire, he returned to deliver the same message: "You need more." Reyes struggled to hold his anger in check. He shouldn't attack the messenger, but his irritation rose with each rejection. The team went out and cultivated new informants, pushing for the elusive more. Their latest CI was Mark, a Nuestra Raza member who sold drugs for Baby Joker, but was always behind on his monthly taxes. The cops popped him for meth sales and did their dance. Cornered and facing a return to prison, Mark reluctantly agreed to wear a hidden recorder. He told the team that the NF's Castroville connections were old girl and some guy called Weasel. He told the officers BJ couldn't make a move without Packy's permission. Packy was the man running all the regiments, he said, not just Salinas. That part seemed a stretch. Packy had been in the gang's bad standing so often it was hard to imagine the NF would let him run a street corner, let alone a regiment. Many speculated that he was only alive because he was Matt Roach's brother-in-law, and so the cops let Mark loose on the streets, waiting for him and his new body recorder to bring them a miracle. Informants came and went. Reyes paid a final visit to a tattoo artist and one-time Nuestra Raza member named Flaco. For 2 months, Reyes had been interviewing the guy, and now it was time to get Flaco out of the county and into witness protection. It was funny how these guys couldn't fathom leaving the state, though Reyes always offered to move them far away when he had resources to do so. But no, most wanted to stay as close to home as they could. The Salinas guys were the worst. They'd go into witness relocation, and 6 months later, they'd say fuck it and end up back on the east side getting shot. It was family that pulled them back. Always family. This one, though, had a little more sense than most. Reyes had to admit he had respect for guys like Flaco. He felt protective of his informants and hoped things would work out for them. He understood how they grew up. He understood the battles. But he reminded himself that they had made their choice. He was like them in many ways, but he was no longer one of them. He and Flaco understood that they were approaching the end of their time together. Reyes was ready to wrap it up when, almost shyly, Flaco mentioned there was one more thing. "Hey, I'm going to get married," he said, "with my girlfriend." Reyes smiled and congratulated him, but Flaco wasn't finished. He summoned his courage and asked, "Would you be my best man?" Reyes was touched and embarrassed. He tried to laugh it off as kindly as possible, but he could see that Flacco was disappointed, perhaps hurt, when he said he couldn't accept the offer. Reyes left tugged by sadness. In Flacco's mind, he'd become a friend, perhaps the only friend Flacco could really trust. An informant was a desperate man, fearful of his gang or a prison bid or both. Reyes always had to impress upon these guys not to tell their wives or girlfriends, parents, nobody that they were cooperating. It was just too dangerous. That left them in a lonely place. Their handlers were the only people informants could confide in, and the bond often grew fast and strong. Reyes had to nurture that intimacy, coax it into the noblest kind of trust, and then, inevitably, cruelly, there came a point when he had to sever it. It stung, went against the grain of his humanity, but there was no way around it. As he left Flacco to find his way alone, Reyes told himself it was time to draw that line again in his mind and heart. Focus on that frail thread he made damn sure never to lose sight of. He was a cop, and this was his job. Now it was time to work Mark the same way, to draw him close but not too close. He felt an almost fatherly urge to stay by Mark's side through this dangerous walk. To get off a simple drug rap, the guy had agreed to risk it all. The damn wiretaps, at least, could have added a small measure of safety to his informant's job. The cops could have listened to the gang leader's private confidences, gotten a sense of how the top dogs felt about this man. Without the wire, the detectives knew. They were blind men leading Mark along the cliff's edge under a moonless sky. The Northern Exposure investigation accelerated. The war room diagrams brimmed with names, and the team was achingly close to nailing down the entire NF structure for the streets. Soon they start thinking arrest tactics. With the rest, they might even get a break in Crystal's murder. Despite continuing delays in getting the wire up, the end was in sight. They were one wiretap warrant away from success. They envisioned raids from San Jose down to Salinas, maybe Sacramento and even San Francisco too. Operation Northern Exposure would make Black Widow a memory, sweeping up the powerful street regiments that had blossomed in its wake. Black Widow had targeted the gang leaders in prison, but Northern Exposure would go down in law enforcement history for taking out its leaders on the streets. It was funny to remember now how modest their dreams had been. When Eddie Rodriguez first approached Reyes, the two men merely hoped to put a dent in the violence plaguing their towns. They couldn't imagine they'd end up tackling the entire NF infrastructure. They were a thrown together, naive, underfunded band of brothers who'd taken on organized crime. They had no budget, no technology, no computer labs. Yet, through talent and perseverance and sweat, they made it work. Their charts were crammed with names and dates and faces. They only needed to name the NF's kingpin, the commander of all the streets, and then the fun would begin. Reyes wondered if Mark was right when he claimed Pocky was the one running everything. Reyes heard rumors that Sal Castaneda's brother Pablo was back on the streets. Although Pablo was a well-known dropout, sources said he was selling dope in Chinatown. The story was the NF gave him a pass because he paid taxes to Pocky. That's a damn lie.